Right, this is going to be another episode of the Best Damn League Show. Technically, usually the Best Damn League Show period, but one that comes from an American show called the Best Damn Sports Show period, which, by the way, I don't even think is on the air for about 15 years at this point in time. So the reference is dated, even though, yes, it's more my wheelhouse. And then secondly, obviously, as Peter will know, we don't say period in England in English, do we? So I've always told Americans this. Listen, you've renamed everything else, just rename the language to American and we can go our separate ways. I mean, at this point in time, all you get is Harry Potter anyway, isn't it? Like, so you don't get much out of it. So it's just the Best Damn League Show. Because here's the thing. I also don't want to call it the Best Damn League Show full stop, which is what we say in England. Not least because that would then carry some sort of other association, and also just don't want to say full stop, do I? I'm not back in school anymore. And by the way, no, people in the middle, if you're from England and you say dot, you can just get out with the Americans as well. You know what? You can I'll get you the visa myself, mate. You can just fuck right off. So anyway, the guest for this episode is going to be Jensen Goh. Now, I'll do some behind the fourth wall shit, aka when no one else will say yes to an episode, this is the guy I hit. He's my bat phone. Jensen, if you're not available and Kira's not here, who the fuck's going to do my shows, mate? So anyway, that's why I always have guests. I've also told the story before, but I'll tell it for Peter's benefit, which is, this is just one of those unfortunate moments on Discord, Peter, where years ago, I got a message from Jensen about something, I forget what it was even about. And basically, because I was used to using Twitter to arrange all my shows and stuff. So I got mentioned, it just said Jensen or something. And then he mentioned something and I just replied I just sort of where you just sort of checking something out. Oh, okay. And so I quickly just typed in, because I thought it was Jensen from Cloud9, who I do know as well, right? And I just put, we should really do a Reflections interview sometime. And I knew I was fucked when I looked back, and he was just yeah, it would be a total honour to do it. I can't even believe you're asking me. And I was like, well, whoa, wait a minute. And then luckily I had to, fucking backtrack it. But here's the thing, though. Did actually do the interview, though. Did do that Reflections. Oh, no, we did talk to Thorin, didn't we? Whatever, but we did do one. But the connection is this. The connection is, in the talk to Thor or whatever, whichever episode we did where it was about your career and stuff, obviously one of the people you worked with was Peter Dun. Maybe people don't know that, Jensen, right? So what is your connection? How do you guys know each other? What's the story? From Splice, I'm guessing, right?
Yep. Do you want to go first, Jensen, or should I?
Well, it's one of those where I'll take this one. As I reached out to Peter over Twitter, so this was when I was still in 2018. I was still working with Evos at a point of time, and then I just reached out to Peter, to let him know that hey, I've become available in the middle of the season, and is there any way I could just come aboard and work for free? And this is still in the age of I come from this era of what we call the mousepad era, right, where people played for mousepads. So this entire concept that everybody is now you got to be paid, you got to be salaried, you got to earn your fair share. It was still a foreign concept to me. That's how I got into esports, and that's how I got a lot of my opportunities. And that's what I did with Peter. I just reached out to Peter. I'm willing to come over. I'm willing to just be in the house, be an extra set of eyes, and let me see how I can contribute. And Peter say, "Yeah, why not? There's some things that we can bring you on for," and that's how I got involved with him and Splice.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that people may not know is that Jensen did a lot of work in East Asia, but mainly in the Vietnamese league. And I was watching, was it called VCS at the time? I'm not even
Yeah, it
sure
was
what it
the
was
It
called.
VCS
was,
era.
it
It was
was,
still
yeah.
it was still VCS at the time, and he came in and did a really really good job on Splice. We had an academy team called Splice Vipers, and Jensen was supposed to be the head coach of the Splice Vipers going into summer, and Splice unfortunately bought Mad Lions on that split, and then there was a rearrangement afterwards. But yeah, he did a really really good job on Splice, and yeah, I've obviously he's somebody that I've respected a lot for a long time, and yeah, it's just one of those things where there's a lot of people that work in minor regions that maybe the international community doesn't know that well. But yeah, I was fortunate to already know him, and obviously since then he's had a good time of it, and well, he's had a time of it in the
Yes.
US, and yeah, he was great to work with. I'll just say that. in
Yeah,
advance.
a couple of things, by the way. One is that he is actually not currently working in League of Legends, guys. Although, by the way, if the right offer comes along, he'll probably dip his toe back in. He even was telling me before, and this sort of says it all actually about where esports is like and in his region. He told me that when he was looking, like, maybe I could work in like an ERL or something. You know what? There's probably work out there. He said when he was looking, at the same time, he saw an ad where he lives for like a job doing boba tea, and it just paid more. And he was like, "What am I doing?" And so he's just doing some real life work now, which is like that is esports for you. In some ways, we're not too far from the mousepad era still, mate. And then the other thing is, one thing I don't know if Peter has any angle on this, but one thing that I've actually always been impressed with Jensen is he is one of those people where I've sort of warmed the crowd up to him over time. First of all, that means I've force-fed them him, and I've done all ridiculous jokes around it. Some people in their brain associate, no, it's a good time when Jensen's on the show, whatever. Like, so basically, he's one of those people that I think is in the vein of the people that maybe they come off a bit too dry to plebs, etc. Or it's too like they're just talking about macro too much. By the way, that features some of the all-time greats. You could put like LS in there back in the day. Who else? Emily Rand. Trying to think in the modern day. The joke is even Cadril, if people don't know. Cadril used to be super dry when he came on my shows. It wasn't until recently that he figured out that, I don't know, until he went to the fountain of Tyler 1 and went, and you're like, oh, Cadril, you're drinking too much then. And then who knows what happened after that. Listen, sometimes the guy's still in there. It's like, Dr. Jekyll comes out sometimes like, oh, guys, yeah, that's a bad lane swap. I don't think that we should do that. But, oh, no, he's coming back again, Mr. Hyde. He's back on stream again. Anyway, so that's going on with all those people. But the point is, actually, one detail I always was very impressed with Jensen, with Peter, is he actually is a very good, I can see why as a coach he had a job. He's actually quite good at like explaining core concepts and macro concepts to people. Because one thing on this show people will appreciate is, and we've made it like a running theme every time he comes on, is he had his own lens a season or two ago that I think you can still apply in the modern day. It'll probably always fit in League. He divides teams between whether they are like map control teams or they are like gold efficiency and scaling teams, basically. And that's like his big lens he puts onto a squad, and then he asks himself like, what meta is it at the moment, which does it play more towards? And I have to say, if you go into like a playoff matchup, that's really interesting to have that two sort of styles. Like, people probably know in sports when people give you a sense of like, this team plays like the pressing defense in football, so that does give you an extra lens if you're an army. You're not just watching just players, you get a sense of how the systems interact. And also along those lines, even though he didn't sell many copies of it, I actually bought that book off him. He did do his own book, it's a physical printed out book, and it is like a lot of these concepts. First of all, it's like how to get a job in esports, sort of, and then it is some of these like macro concepts. And I do think once you get outside the particulars of the meta in League, Counter-Strike's the same way. There are some big fundamental aspects that always work in the game. That's always like modes of thinking that apply. From working with him, we said something similar, Peter?
Yeah, no, I think that's very fair. I think as a head coach, he was a really, really good kind of like systems coach. And when he was working with the main team as an analyst, he did a lot of like really good scouting because this was the Splice team, the 2019 Splice team, which everyone thought was like a no-hoper team when we went to Worlds, and we did make quarterfinals. It wasn't that bad.
And beat FPX one game.
Did beat FPX, and he had a lot to do with that, right? Like preparing for the international team. So I think he contributed a lot to Splice that year.
Yeah, you have to understand, Jensen. I made that joke earlier, but actually, against international competition at that time, you were probably better than the other Jensen. You got one win off Doinby, mate, and he was unbeatable at that time. Just ask Nemesis. Anyway, let's get on with the episode. So obviously, the key reason why Jensen is here is he actually still does watch the LEC. We must have our hooks really deep into him from those old fucking days. But he's still watching the bloody LEC all these years later with Rogue and SK and everything. Even though he's not even working, he's working Bilba T. Oh, what's going on? Oh, it's Rogue playing SK. Oh shit, is it an 89-minute game? Brilliant. So this guy's a true believer. So let's see where we're going here. So Jensen, the guest always starts. What is good about the LEC at the moment? What is good?
So I actually want to talk a little bit about Fearless Draft. And now that we're into the playoff stage and we're starting to play best of fives, right? So the good about the LEC is that when you bring me on in the winter split, this is when I get to do a lot of my, oh wow, there's a lot of potential. Potential is always kind of the meme here,
Right.
because people like to tend to overfocus on the bad things and then try to miss out on what the good things that are happening over there. And what I see is that I think that there is a lot of interesting approaches with how some teams are preparing themselves for the Fearless format, right? Because if I'm going to be real here, when you look at this Fearless era of League of Legends, your ability to go to games of Legends, and even though you introduced me as one guy who just applies like this lens of this team is the map control team and stuff like that, in the Fearless era, that is going to be very different. So I'm going to draw a Magic the Gathering analogy towards this.
Well,
Where
he's doing
in
an
the
LS. He's doing
Fearless
the LS. Go
era,
for it. Go for it. Go on.
yeah.
Hit me with it.
In Magic the Gathering, you have got this thing called formats, right? Where you have standard, which is the latest. I don't know what it is now, but it's like
Yeah.
the last 2 years, 3 years. It keeps freaking changing.
It's essentially
right?
which sets of cards you're allowed to play,
Of
guys.
cards
Is
that
what he's
can be
going to
played
talk
with.
about. Yeah.
Yes, right? And then you have extended and you have legacy and vintage. So it just goes all the way back. And the deeper that you go in the best of five, you're actually playing a different format every single time. So how do teams prepare for these type of things? And you can see very clearly the different teams have different ideas as to how do we go about approaching a format like that. And it gives me quite a fair bit of hope. Right, there are things like that. There are things like I think Merwin's champion pool, where he's able to bring out the Vex and
Okay.
stuff like that. I think Peter can bring up a lot of things about Merwin. I think Peter worked with Merwin before,
He
right?
actually
Like
wanted
he was playing
Merwin for
Fiddlesticks
Heretics,
top
believe
and
it or
stuff
not.
like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, he was going to have him.
Yeah, and 1 year too early because this is where a player like Merwin, and then you can start to have all these unique picks coming out for him, and then this is the type of format where players like that start to gain a lot of value, and then you can see um teams like BDS where they are still very dramatic, right? And I think that I always praise BDS when it comes to the winner split and their ability to coordinate this map control style of play. So BDS has always been the two-lane style of play, and we always thought that, oh, they have to do this because it's Adam, right? They got rid of Adam, they got a new top laner, and they're still playing the same two-lane style of play. Um, and I like the way that they're connecting on the map. It checks a lot of the checkboxes that I have in terms of the flow charts that I would do for players in terms of how do you execute the style of play. Of course, player quality and their ability to close things out given certain positions, I would still say it's a
By the
little
way,
bit
just to
lacking over there.
clarify, because
But
since you're making this a good point, when you're saying that they still do the same two-lane style, you're actually putting that as a positive because it sort of like streamlines the game for the players or
yes,
something, I'm guessing. Right. Right.
yes, because once you have a core concept into place, you're no longer shackled to this idea, right? Just the beauty about the map control style. The truth of the map control style, the fundamental truth is that if I bring five people to a team fight and you bring four, I'm going to win the team fight,
Sure.
right? Regardless of what champions you play over there. So in the fearless format, as things start to get whittled down, it takes a lot of pressure from, oh, what is the team and what is the
Right.
synergy of the things that we're trying to bring together? Because if I execute this correctly, I'm always going to bring a numerical superiority to the fights, and then the draft it takes certain stresses of the draft out of the picture. Right. I think there were even stories when I was talking to some of the American coaches where once you understand the macro elements of the game, you can actually be literally be doing ultimate bravery. So for those of the people who only started following League in the last holy crap, it's like 8 years or so, ultimate bravery used to be a thing, but it was this website that generated a random set of items for you to buy in old school League of Legends.
Okay.
And then you were supposed to do it like a streamer challenge or something. You just bought like random items
Right.
and you went over there and still tried to win the game with it. You can literally do that and still win the game because you
Right.
just brought superior numbers to every fight and you just had the right macro down.
Mhm.
So that is my group with regards to that. And Fnatic. So I'm just gonna go through
What was it
the
called?
teams over
Ultimate
here.
Bravery? Ultimate
Ultimate
Bravery.
Bravery.
Right,
Yeah,
okay,
Ultimate
right,
Bravery.
okay.
Yeah, and for Fnatic, you can see that they're going for like these little champion combinations, right? I think it might be because G2 did it against them first, but a lot of people flame them for doing the Pantheon Leona game because they it looked like they were completely out of the driver's seat against it, but ended up come back against it. So this was one team who put a lot of emphasis on the macro elements and they executed well on that. This is the other team that's saying that okay, we're gonna go with this. So we talk about the lenses of the game, right? So some teams are about goal efficiency, some teams are about map control, and this is where we talk about cooldown management, spell economy. And what happens is that when you do something like Pantheon Leona, it gives you a very clear window to exploit spell economy. I know they killed Ice while he still had, I think, Cleanse and Flash both up, but this is the type of things that, as fearless drafts come along, where you start to realize that you can exploit certain things with certain combos, things like Pantheon Leona become a very lethal weapon in this type of format. So, if one of the things that people have to realize is that it's very easy for the casual person to just watch Pro League of Legends and then go over there. So, why doesn't this team do this, right? It's the very usual question of why didn't they just pick Iron in every single game? Why don't they just pick this champion that nobody has ever played before? Is that people have to realize that you have a limited limited amount of time, and everything in Pro League of Legends is a function of that. And when you start to look at a winter split, why I tend to be always so positive in the winter split is that you tend to be very charitable to say that this is the laundry list of things that they have to work on. This is a laundry list of things that they have to work on in the entire year. They're about 30% of the way through it, and they're showing lots of promise. Let's hope they can keep up with the rest of that, right? And what that 30% in the winter split is going to be different from team to team. But if the team is showing progress and they're not just trying to put what I call good stuff gumbo on the table, then that's where I would say that that's a positive, right? I think that teams are working for it. They're developing weapons. And if we talk about having hope and having a chance against the Eastern teams, this is the type of things that you want to be seeing. You want teams to be thinking along these lines and not just the very old school, what is Korea playing? Let's go, let's pick the Renekton in the top lane because that's what we saw them play. Let's pick the Jace in the mid lane because that's what we saw them play. Going Beast playing Karma mid. Let's just pick Karma mid. We're really trying to build these core fundamentals and understanding, right? It forces teams to break away from just copying what Asian teams do and having to build their own solid set of systems and fundamentals. And teams that are able to do this, be it in terms of like picking up these cheesy esoteric combos, like what we saw with Fnatic in the Pantheon Leona, what BDS is doing in terms of being able to have this solid set of fundamentals, or even having just players like Morwen being able to bring in all the what we call draft edge, right? Because we don't really know what he's going to pull out. And then when we have this will tie in a little bit to the bad point that I have later on, but when you have a unbalanced draft, that's when a player like Morwen will be able to shine
Sure.
because he
Uh,
will be able to find a pick that can really abuse it. Yep.
sure. I mean, I think also it's really. I mean, I think what you're talking about practice efficiency is important, right? Like, obviously, you have a limited amount of hours to practice in a single week, but I think this format has really, really benefited teams that have and teams that have players that have lots of experience of different formats, right? Like, so how many scrims do we think G2 put into an Nivea mid? I don't think they played that many
It's
scrims
implied
with an
maybe
Nivea mid.
none.
Yeah,
I
but
think it's zero.
yeah,
Yeah.
they could easily be zero, right? But Caps has experienced these games at like the highest level. I'm sure BB like practice because Anivia Top was like being played earlier on in the split. So I'm sure that they've theory crafted Anivia, right? But if you look at teams, this should in theory be a format which at least in winter which benefits teams with tons of veterans, but in G2's case, you look at Skumond. Skumond is the rookie coming into the team, and he's not playing anything weird, right? Like, sure, he played some Pantheon games, but you could see that he's much more limited in his champion pool versus say Broken Blade and versus Caps. So they've clearly there's room for innovation, but not everyone on the team can innovate. And this is I don't know how much you've got on GX later, but in theory, the people who should be able to innovate are the people that are the teams that have a ton of veterans who should have experienced a number of these different formats and should be able to draw on that knowledge. Whereas like rookies, you don't expect them to be able to innovate because sure, maybe you can pick your I don't know your odd off meta support pick, right? If you're Paris, but that doesn't mean that you can play it at an LEC level. Sure, you can play it at an ERL level. Like K-Corp played Seneyaso, right? Which they was their auto win bot lane at ERL level because nobody could beat them. You pick it into G2, they're gonna murder you, right? Like, but this is the at least they have the balls to try it, but it doesn't benefit them, this ability to innovate, as much as it benefits other teams. The big problem with this format, though, is what happens when you have teams full of veterans who should be able to innovate, but are too afraid to innovate. And this is like, I think you have a responsibility as a veteran of a team, at least in this winter format, to be willing to innovate. Because you're the one who has the experience of these formats and knows what you can play at a very high level. And to me, the veterans that are on teams with rookies that have refused to innovate have let their side down and are basically not fulfilling their obligations to the teams. So I agree with you that the format that it's good. It's better than I thought it was going to be. I'll be honest. But some teams have been able to do it well, and some teams have not been able to do it at a high level, right? And that I think is a little bit on coaches, but I think it's a lot down to veterans on the team, right? Like, why would you look at GX? Is Jackie's the one who is picking the Lee Sin mid, right? Like, they have so many veterans on that team. Why aren't any of the other veterans on that team being the ones who go for the innovation?
I actually have a way to even flip this question around, right? Because this is a very I think it's a very interesting thing, but I was thinking about, right? Because the immediate reaction that I think most coaches who aren't actively coaching at the moment are going to look at Fearless Draft and going to think to themselves, and I myself included, thought this. Oh wow, it's Fearless Draft. It means that your agency as a coach, because your ability to control draft, which is one of the core duties as a coach, has increased. If I was coaching today, I will be able to contribute X, Y, and Z to a team, right? And then you start to think about the logistics of it. And how do you really scrim in this format, right? Because in the past, there's like this set of scrims, and then there's this like unspoken set of rules in terms of like how much innovation is allowed and stuff like that. Because if you're innovating too much, it pisses the opponent team off as well, right? Because if you don't do your innovation properly, the other team gets pissed because you just wasted our time, right? What's the Soraka mid nonsense that you're playing over here? And at the same time, right? Because you're playing in a different format, your game one is going to be a much more higher powered format as compared to game five in the series, right? So once again, Magic the Gathering analogies. There are champions like Azir. This is a siege rhino, right? The Magic the Gathering
Okay.
equivalent is this thing called a siege rhino, right?
Okay.
It's just a goodstuff.com champion. He comes in there, he does everything. He's self-sufficient in lane. He doesn't require a lot of jungle attention. He is independent on side lane, so plays the side lane decently well. He can disengage, he can engage, he does everything, right? It's the old meme about Lee Sin. It's a mage, fighter, tank, assassin, does
Yeah.
everything in the game. And then you have some other champions where, as you start to go into the later stages of the game, you need to dig deeper into the thing, right? So you see like the Kaisa and Zaya and these champions where like they're the good stuff 80 carries. And then when you go to game four and game five, you start to see Caitlyn's, you start to see Twitches and stuff like that, the more esoteric picks. If I'm going to be playing Twitch and you say that, okay, our practice objective is we are going to be practicing Twitch compositions, and that's something that you're expecting to play on game three onwards in their fearless format, and then the opponent is just saying that we are just going to focus on our basics. We're going to focus on our laning. They're picking Azir, they're picking Zaya, and they're just smashing you every game. You guys are communicating, and that scrim ends up being communicated on a different level. So this is why we can talk about, oh, they should be innovating. I think the structure of how teams step up as well is one of the challenges of the Fearless format that I think should be explored a little bit more as well.
Sure. And just to go back to your analogy, I think the for people that don't follow Magic the Gathering, I think that basically the idea of a Siege Rhino is like a jack of all trades pick, and then you go back. Then once you've used all your jack of all trades, you go to the champions which have really clear niches and specializations, and then as it progresses further on, through the draft format, you go to champions which have more weaknesses, which work, but only in a very, very specific situation. So basically, your ability to fulfill multiple roles becomes much reduced, and you're having a lot of like very specialized picks, kind of as the format goes on, right? And I think in terms of the different formats in Magic, you have like one format which has cards from the last 25 years, so one format which is cards from the last 4 to 5 years, and one which is cards from the last 2 years, right? So you have that's kind of how it works in the Magic the Gathering, right?
Okay. I'll pick up on all that. So I'll start at the very end there. And I say this out of love. I consider him a little brother. And listen, when things are public, they're just fair game. Obviously, the joke is LS's favourite format now is just the cards from the last few years. So, because here's the thing, he had those really rare Black Lotuses, didn't he? Well, they're even rarer now. So
I mean, that's really fucked up. I mean, I know
I'm
not saying
obviously.
I'm not saying it's fucked up. I'm not saying it's fucked up to joke about
No,
it. But I'm saying that,
obviously.
But like, what? who on earth goes into somebody's house and like, holy moly, yeah.
By the way, that's even the worst part about it. It's not even just that he lost them. It's the idea that like it was the worst part. By the way, but guys, he has millions and millions of dollars. He'll be okay. He's not going to be homeless. But the worst part actually is the idea you have to like question who in your group did it as like an inside job or something. That is the craziest part. It's obviously better if it'd been an outsider who'd nicked them. Anyway, that's just a joke. And also, LS was the one who brought MTG thinking into League of Legends. So then the other thing is, I also do agree, but that's even the way I actually said in the past that you could even use something like Fearless. It's like you just use it like Magic the Gathering, like, right, we're going to do this format at the beginning, and then we're going to do this one for the next one, etc., which is even basically what they're sort of doing at the moment, except the joke is, if it's too successful, because Riot's Riot, they're just going to go, actually, it's all Fearless now. It's like, oh, bloody hell, you missed the point of it, you missed the point. Anyway, to rewind a little bit, one thing about the whole drafting element that I think is funny is it shows how, I always say this in Counter-Strike, by the way, when they bring a new map out, people ask me, so what's it going to be like? How's it going to work? It's like, how the fuck would I know? I need to see pros use it in me. I need to see pros, like, I need to see what's good and how people abuse it, what actually like doesn't work that conceptually was good. So one concept from Fearless that I've already noticed is, it's like Jensen said about how people think like, oh, we're all Dylan Falco now, let's cook. First of all, a lot of people have tried to cook in Fearless format and just cooked themselves. Like, there's a lot of people who've tried those crazy drafts and they don't have the team with the veterans in period. It hasn't worked for them. Secondly, I actually think in some ways it's made it, you have to band-aid even more with the Siege Rhinos, right? Because now what you have to do, because there's 7 million draft permutations, is you've got to have like a mains, like an R type shit or a Z that like, I'm definitely going to build one comp around that, right? That's one taken on my mind. I've got 700 variations, but that'll do it. Which, by the way, is why, and when we lead to a topic later about drafting in certain teams, I think one of the edges in the draft in the modern day is the opposite of what people think. People are still thinking old school draft theory of like, I'm trying to get my picks. Oh, no. The guys who are the demon coaches are the ones just ruining your draft with their game 1 and game 2 drafts. Like, they're taking out your Siege Rhino game 2 with a totally inappropriate pick, and it's like, oh, fuck that. I was relying on that in game 3, and it's just gone. And then you're just like, well, what are we locking in now? So there's that angle. Also, I'll just throw this in as a joke now, because we can have some variety in, I did the joke about LS, so a similar one. Obviously, the joke is the spirit of Ultimate Bravery does live on Jensen. Nuke is still doing it in the LEC right now. Straight fire joke if you saw that particular game where he built the way he built. So even he didn't know what he was going to build next. No one did, even the makers of League of Legends. So then also, I'll just give a quick shot to the LEC region. Shout out to the LEC. We used to be the innovative region. We even used to have it where like fucking amazing or something like that in Europe would go, I brought Lee Sin to the meta. It's like, yeah, about 2 months after like they did it in Korea, mate. But they'd always claim like that. We play Pantheon too. Jungle, of course. We don't play it mid like all the fucking Asian demons are just taking over the whole game. So sort of tells you actually, by the way, guys, about what like the different levels of conceptualization of mid game and macro is from our mid laners. We just let the fucking junglers carry on that shit. And it's just like a less powerful version of Pantheon. But actually, I've got a point on Peter's thing there that's actually a core concept from Counter-Strike I want to bring over. In Counter-Strike, one thing that we've learned about veterans and rookies is you've got to actually, you'd love it in this sense, Peter, you've got to actually invest resources into the rookie, but in the team, I mean. So there's obviously limited team resources in League. That's like carry picks, that's like fucking peel, that's jungle attention, whatever. The problem in Counter-Strike, basically, it's things like, do you get the spot that you can play? Do you have the role that makes sense for your skill set? And we used to do it very cynically back in the day. I mean, the most famous team ever in Counter-Strike was NIP, the one that went undefeated at the beginning of CSGO. And what they used to do was they kept the same core that had gone undefeated and won all these championships and stuff. And then they had one player they kicked when it started to go bad. And they literally just did a revolving door policy on the 5th spot. And the worst thing about the fact it was a revolving door, and eventually even the people coming in who were the rookies knew like, well, shit, it's always those 4 guys. They're like the royalty. I'm the new guy, and so what happens if it goes badly? Listen, mate, it doesn't matter how you play, you're out. That's the point. So because of that, though, they had this crazy mindset. I think this is quite reminiscent of LEC here, bro, of if it works out with the new guy, great, then we'll really worry about it, and then we'll build around him, then we'll give him the resources. If it doesn't, though, I've got a list this long, I'll go to the next guy. And the worst thing about that mentality was, it meant this logic happened. It wasn't like these were all like bad players or supports that you recruited in Counter-Strike. Sometimes you were even recruiting like an AWP, like a star role, but you were never investing the resources in him to let him be a star. And I always used to say, it doesn't make sense he did the pickup. Like, why would you pick him up for what he did on a team where he was the star and he had everything? Put him on your team and sort of go, well, we've got all the good spots. You can have the shit ones. Then when he fails, goes, well, that didn't work. Bring in another star. It's like, you're never giving them the chance to be the player that you recruited. And by the way, I think that's a perfect metaphor for what I've seen them do to some of the players in the LEC. You recruit a guy because he's a demon in the ERL or EU Masters. Then on your team, you sort of go, yeah, just play on your own for a while. Sink or swim. Nah, fuck it, get the next one. So it just doesn't work. And I also do think the same applies in the draft. I'm with you. In the modern day, I don't want it to be because the analogy would be what we changed in CS was people now understand if you recruit like the up-and-coming players. So, for example, we sometimes have financial obligations ourselves in CS. You can't sign all the biggest players anymore. They have such massive salaries. If you gamble on like that guy coming up, but you know it's because he was good and that's why you picked him up. Actually, what you normally do is you take one of the veterans who could just go, hey, I've earned my sort of status, give me my thing still, I've been here in the long time. Normally what you actually do is you ask that guy, like, come on, give up a bit to this guy, because if he works, we're all going to win. It's going to work, right? I agree, in the draft, that is absolutely what should happen, mate. There's no way, like, the veteran should be like, just give me my pick. It's like, we're in the fairness draft, mate. It's not the old days where you just get, like, the comfort pick or whatever. Like, actually, yeah, if anything, you're the one who could probably handle, especially, by the way, as you've seen already, that meme from FlyQuest at Worlds is real. If people haven't played, like, the first, like, 70 champions, they're in for a fucking bad time when Garen's picked, mate. They don't know what happens when an Ivia comes on the map. Like, you've at least played, like, Froggen 50 times and solo queue in mid lane, you know what I mean? Like, give us a chance. Like, you might be able to swim in that waters that they will sink in, bro. They will sink. I mean, by the way, you even saw in that game that there were people that were just like, well, shit, is that what, the Ivia wall? What the fuck is this wall? I'm trapped. Like, and you're like, bro, what? And then you just remember they were like 8 years old when that shit was being played. Like, I don't blame them for that. Same with the Nunu. We all laughed if you were a veteran, like, he's never seen a game get ruined by Nunu. Yeah, he hasn't. He's playing like LCK, like level fucking super Korean shit his whole career. And then lastly, I'll just say this. On the actual point, I thought it was a very good point actually about how certain assets essentially that have been built on and incorporated in the team in Fearless are going to pay dividends. The Merwin champion pool is one, because what's funny is it was almost a meme when it was the standard meta, because he would just do it like as a reflex. He would just do the craziest pick ever. Like, whoa, is that even actually something you prepared? Bro, there's a clip, I think it was Los Ratones on stream or something, where they react to him locking in the Vex counter to better, which by the way worked. It actually worked. Yeah, but I remember just thinking like, this is going to be the best part of the streaming, core streaming. I want to see people just mald when he locks the shit in, because you're just like, there's no way, right? Because remember, I won't say which players, but there's certain players in those teams that absolutely are still in that thing of like, hey, if Chovy's playing it in LCK, it must be the best pick. And if you're in that world, Merwin is just going to fucking blow your mind, bro. You're never going to know what the fuck this guy's doing, because he's clearly operating on his own script, mate. He's not just looking up, like you say on Game of Legends, what did Toynbee play last week? He's actually just figuring out the shit that he thinks works. And by the way, sometimes it isn't going to work, but sometimes it will, like that. And what a mad edge to have in the draft, where you have a secret pick that, like, I don't even know if you knew actually worked in that scenario. You're just willing to go for it. And I think actually the person, by the way, for the macro part, I agree with you on that. Like, here's the problem. Fans are going to meme, I'm sure we've got something on this later, about like, oh, great macro, they're losing all the late game. How do you think they get into the mid game? How do you think that roster of players that on paper probably shouldn't even win one lane on the whole map, how do you think they get these massive leads in the mid game? Spoiler, against like Fnatic, for fuck's sake. Like, they actually have to have a way to systematically play around their players, and everyone has to be on the same page. And yes, they fuck it up later in the game, but that's also different. That's not pure macro at that point in time. It's things like, do you trust the decision making? Are you too hesitant? Do you go too early? There's all like psychological factors you have to factor in there. And to me, the obvious player that it benefits, by the way, this particular macro style is Ice. He's the star player, if you notice. He's the one I can rely on almost every game. He was carrying that fucking game against Fnatic at the end where he just got caught. This guy's a stud. The problem is, though, if you've ever seen his teams, they clearly do limit what champions he plays, because he's not the ADC that's going to like shot call and go in the fight. So as a result, like, if you have that style, he knows where to be on the map at all times. People know where to be for him, when to group, when to fight. I think it just sets him up. I think it just makes him look really good. So, yeah, there we go. I think it was a good point. Good point. Right, Peter, what is your good point going to be?
My good point is going to be that Fearless, it's about G2 a little bit, but it's mainly about Labrov, right? So Labrov is somebody who's been getting a bit of stick from the community, and I think this series, he really got to show why you cannot disrespect him. and I would say K-Corp came into the series against G2 a little bit naive, because Kalist is so fucking good that at ERL level he could do whatever he wants, right? Like him and Targamas, when they're playing against ERL bot lanes, they could go Senna Nila blind, they could go Senna Yasuo blind, they could do uh, they can pick Draven blind, they could do whatever they want, and it just doesn't matter, and they're going to win the 2v2. But you go and do that into G2, and specifically you go and do that into Labrov, because you look at G2 and you think, okay, who are the weakest members of G2?
Sure.
It's, you probably say Labrov and Skumon, and you disrespect Labrov's Blitzcrank by picking Lulu blind. You disrespect Labrov's melee champion pools by picking Senna Yasuo blind into him. He's going to destroy you, right? Like, he's not like some. Man, there's so many ERL supports I could have just flamed just now, but he's not some of those ERL supports. And basically, I think K-Corp had a way to approach the G2 series, but the information that they had, and this is the rookies versus veteran thing, right? The information that they had from their rookies wasn't correct, right? And this is why I'm really frustrated at the format, because if this was a best of 5 format, it makes sense that K-Corp get destroyed against G2. In fact, they did better against G2 than I thought they were going to do first time, because they are bringing in information about what the bottom part of their champion pool, the below the first 3 or 4 champions. They think they can pick a lot more things than they can pick, but now they've learned that lesson. But they may not even get another chance this split to fix that, and then we've lost. Then Fearless is gone for the rest of the year. Or maybe it's not, but in
We'll see on
theory,
that
it's
one.
gone. Yeah, we'll see on that one. But to me, so the G2 K-Corp from series, I think, was decided a lot in draft. I think it was really, really good to see Labrov step up, because Labrov, his highs are not as high as Mickey, but the one thing you can say about Labrov is he is at worst a 7 out of 10 constant, and then he'll get his Blitzcrank, or Blitzcrank is the big one, right, for Labrov. When I think of
Yeah.
Labrov, Blitzcrank is really the big one, and he will destroy you on that no matter what you pick. But also, I think that the way that G2 have set up their draft has been very, very smart. They recognize that not everyone can innovate. You have to have people who are stable in the team. They've allocated Skumond and Hans Sama as the guys who don't get to innovate. They just pick the a small pool of champions, and they've just let BB go wild. And Caps wasn't going wild in best of ones, but he's now been allowed in best of threes and best of fives to go deeper in his champion pool. And it makes me wonder why. So Broken Blade I think he has 100% win rate on Cho'Gath, right? Like, I think he's 3-0 or 4-0 on the champion this split. But it makes sense as somebody who's coached for a long time and who's worked with who's seen Cho'Gath be in the meta. Why is Broken Blade the only one who's innovating, who's going back to the Cho'Gath? Have people forgotten that this champion exists? Like, they can see it working, right? The concept is working.
Yeah.
So why are G2 the only ones who are innovating in this way, right?
Okay.
And so it's partly good for Labrov, good for how G2 are drafting, but also kind of a bit of shade on the rest of the league for not putting in the same innovation as G2 are doing.
Go on, gents.
To be fair, in the defense of the other teams, is that was a game 4 draft, right?
Sure.
And that's where you really start to skim away all the good stuff.com picks, and then you
Yeah.
really get to let all these stuff things shine. And I believe that was the first best of 5 that was played as well in this format.
Yeah.
So I think the jury's still a little bit out with regards to that. And once we start to play more best of 5s, then you can start to see this innovation come up a little bit more. Because when you're still just playing only 2 games, when you're playing 3 games, it hasn't gone from legacy into extended yet. You're still playing with basically. So once again, Magic the Gathering terminology here. Legacy is everything that's available, right? You have access to everything in the history of the game, and that's what game 1 is basically. So if you're playing a best of 3 with Fearless, it just means that okay, what you played in the previous game, you're just removing 10 champions from the game. You go to game 2, you go to game 3, you have removed 20 champions, and then another 10 that would ban out. It's only 30 champions removed from the game, as compared to when you go to game 4, game 5, then that's where you really start to see these stuff opportunities pop up. And before that, everybody's just gonna pick Sante, Azir, and all the good stuff champions, right? So I don't think it's the fairest to go in and then say that okay, this is why is it that these teams are not showing us these innovations, because I think the format hasn't forced them to show it yet.
Sure.
Okay.
But I would say BB is the only one who's playing Cho'Gath, even internationally. Like LPL teams and LCK teams aren't playing Cho'Gath either. Like I just had a quick check on Game of Legends here for the regions, and literally the only other Cho'Gath games are in ERLs.
Okay,
It's just
I voluntarily
okay.
I volunteer as well as to this once again innovation, right? This is something that I think is not just in League of Legends, in engineering or everywhere around the world. Everybody talks about this, like, wow, this magical thing, right? Why don't we just innovate the next Uber, the next iPhone, and stuff like that? And I have a little bit of a formula that teams can go with as to how they can innovate moving forward. Um, you know what? Since I talked about it, I'm just going to bring it up now because we're talking about draft, right? And then this can maybe tie into my point later on. But in my time coaching, and I think that I'm not sure what Peter's analysis of this, but I consider myself fairly okay at to do decent in being able to draft as a coach.
For sure,
Yeah.
for sure.
So one of the things that I have is that I have a checklist of things that I want to have in order to what I call create a balanced team composition. And what happens is that when you don't fulfill this checklist, you create opportunities for the opponents to exploit you. And it is when you identify these opportunities, then that's where you can start to break the rules yourself and then be able to pick things that are able to specifically exploit these type of weaknesses.
Right.
And I think that is what happened exactly in that game because K-Corp, they didn't pick what I call a balanced composition. They tried to go for this Rice Viego 2-lane pick, and then they went for the Seraphine after that, which meant that it became very tough for them to ever execute on a side lane strategy. So instead of being able to pick something that at least has some form of side lane presence to couple of the Anivia, they were then able to say that, okay, you guys can't execute on a side lane strategy. So now all we need to do is just hard outskill you guys, and then they can identify the scenario, what best fits the team fight in the scenario. Kogath is something that's available for Broken Bait. They pick it in that scenario. So it might be another one of those things where he's just had like one or two games of it in solo queue. Maybe he was trying the Hail of Blades thing that was popular for a little bit, and then they saw that the opportunity came up. They identified a weakness, a potential exploit, and then they went with that. So that's how it's what we call needs-based innovation, right? Where you identify a pain point, you identify a weakness, and you then create a solution to that. And then that's where the innovation comes from. It's so scenario specific. It's really hard to say that, oh, why aren't people innovating as a whole to come up with these sort of things? Because they aren't playing against K-Corp who are drafting these things and going Rice Viego and let's go with Seraphine support, right? I'm very sure LCK teams and LPL teams don't draft like that because that is just a straight up draft mistake.
Sure.
Okay, right, a bunch of things. If we rewind all the way to the beginning, when you said Labrov, I knew exactly where you were going on this one, which is, you're right. If you look at the G2 players, and by the way, this is always the edge that Dylan Falco has before he even starts the bloody draft. He just starts the game, in the analogy of football, he starts 1-0 up, like, because in the draft, you go, right, bro, we used to have 3 bans back in the day and used to torture coaches this. You go, why didn't you just ban X, which is the signature champion of the player, right? Whether it's meta or not. And it's like, first of all, I have 3 bans, motherfucker. Secondly, there's all those meta picks that just win the game. And then thirdly, sometimes I want to spend 2 bans on their best player. So if you look at G2, the beauty of their team is, you look at it and then you go, oh, I'm going to ban out Hans Sama. Obviously, got to get that Draven out, haven't I? Oh, what's Cap's play at the moment? What's Broken? And then at the end, it's like, well, shit, I've got no bans left, have I? And then suddenly it's just like, oh, lol, Blitzcrank angle. And that's one of those ones where, yeah, I were you. Blitzcrank at support is fucking Labrov's Draven for Hans Sama. It's like, every time you let it through, yeah, in theory, you can deal with. This is where people do that thing I hate as well, where they just talk about like the champion, like it's just being piloted by anyone like me. I'm just playing it now in this game. Yeah, you could shut down my Blitzcrank all day long. Difference is, Labrov is a fucking demon on that. If you saw him in BDS, like the amount of games, if he locked that in, it was an instant win. The analogy I would give if you watch LCK is, the exact same thing happens with another Blitzcrank player, Lehens. When he was on Gen G, you look at that team, it's like a fucking super team. Even Pace is popping off, right? Fuck the Lehens guy, or he's not that good, is he? So then you go, oh, just let his Blitzcrank through, it's not even the best champion. The people who are amazing on that champion are just like 1.5 times better than normal players on that champion. And remember, the whole thing is the fucking grab has like the cooldown, doesn't it? So all you're doing, like Mad Lifestyle, is you just get like, when you're posturing for a fight, you're just getting a free chance to just pull someone in your team and kill them. And if you miss, it's like, who gives a shit? You just throw it out there. And also, the really good blitzcranks, if you've watched since the old Mad Life days back in the day, they don't really do like the noob thing of just line it up and then definitely hit it. They do the gamble ones where when you step back, when you're doing your dodge like this in the middle of the posturing, you just get caught randomly. And that is the worst. By the way, that not only gets you a kill, it's the most demoralizing feeling in the world where like your teammates just getting pulled in. What are you fucking doing? It's like, that can happen to anyone when you let those picks go through. Then there's the whole thing that the Cho'Gath one, this must be a quick joke. It's like the reason they don't pick Cho'Gath, Peter, it's too feast and famine. Whatever. You have to understand, my entire comedy style is based just on watching Basil Brush when I was a kid, Peter. Boom, boom. That's it. I'm just giving you like a bit of... he'll know that because it's such an old reference, but if you know, that's actually where like sort of my humour comes from. I just don't say boom, boom, because that's his catchphrase. Probably sue me. Please don't sue me, State of Basil Brush, whoever the fuck owns that copyright. Probably actually going to be copyright free. Maybe I'll just actually make that my character. Then lastly, on the whole thing, this is also where... By the way, we'll just tie this in and we'll go back on this because you've sort of led into what I was going to do as my good point, like Dylan Falco draft diffing with the fucking G2 KC series, but we can just lead into that because that's what we're talking about anyway. So what I would say is this, is there's a concept quite similar, it's more limited in Counter-Strike, which is our drafting is just the map you play. But when I say just the map you play, it's because it's not as pivotal overall, like it can't limit players in the same way, but it does definitely like emphasize your strengths as a team, your style as a team, and especially crucially into that specific opponent. And the problem is to draft really well in Counter-Strike, similar concept. It's not just draft well for your team. The really good coaches, because they have the best teams and the best pool and the players most capable of playing something they didn't plan for, they do, I would say, three things. And I would say this is what I see Dylan Falco do here. Because a lot of people are going to go, well, I could do those drafts. Like, no, but you wouldn't. This is the key thing. You wouldn't, even if that opportunity presented itself. So, number one, you want to, as I said, not just get good picks for you, you want to punish when they do bad picks. So, for example, like you're saying, if they're picking a comp with no damage and they're going towards one person at the end, it's like, you know what, forget what I was planning here. Maybe it's time to pick something that punishes that super heavily. Maybe now, but I'm going to go like Nidalee jungle or something absurd like that, and I'm just going to run ragged over your team. Then you've got to, similar to that, you've got to, at times in the draft, gamble. Like, you don't always know these picks are going to work. You have to actually be willing to throw them off and to bring something different to the game, like we're saying, innovation wild. But it's not guaranteed. Even if that player says he plays that, you don't really know how to work in this comp in game 4 of a fearless draft, mate. No one does. That's actually part of what we're doing here. We're walking a tightrope with no safety net. And then lastly, I pointed out earlier, you have to also be willing in a full best of 5, in my opinion, which is why we haven't seen full fearless for me. BL3s wasn't it. It was like you could still get somewhat predictable floor chart drafts in game 3. Game 5s, as you've seen if you watch the LCK, are fucking wild. That really is some like LS fucking drafting Nevada or fucking dystopia apocalypse now. Like, in that scenario, you have to be willing to also potentially disrupt their draft. And that takes fucking balls, mate. If you're trying to fuck up his draft and then you fuck up your own, you all look like idiots. The game's trash. Now, you go home and it's like, we can't even say we'll do that again next time. We'll probably never get that draft ever again in our lives. Like, I actually do think that's why, even though, yes, I'll always give him this credit. In this G2 and the last one, he has a bevy of talents. He even has his own sort of Merwin in fucking Broken Blade at this point in time. He's got all these extra picks. Even Caps is winning the first time in a Nivea. These are like your dream if you're a coach trying this style. But people have to just actually give Dylan Falco his credit. He is just a fucking draft wizard, mate. Like, he clearly does not only live for that shit, but he does all those things I've just described when those opportunities arrive. And also, what I love is when he does them, he's absolutely willing to hang his hat on it and just be wrong and just fucking fail. And then it'll be, hey, it was on me. I fucked it up. Because that statement he said, he's not a cocky guy. People don't know this. He actually tends to be quite measured in how he speaks publicly. When he says that's like one of the biggest drafters he's ever seen, what he's almost saying there is like, they didn't even sort of respond. They just did like what I did my shit, and then they just took it. They just took it on the chin. So, what do you think about this the draft diff?
I just have one point, and then I'll let Jensen go. I mean, the thing about Dylan is people think he's trash talking. He's not trash talking. It's just like, it's almost like disappointment. You know, it's like the disappointed father. You know, like, oh, I expected so much more, and I just didn't get it. You know, I had so much. I had page 2, page 3 of my notebook, and I just didn't get to show it. And from when it's Dylan saying that kind of stuff, that's just like, I mean, that's just disappointment. That's not trash talk, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, Jason.
What did you think of the draft difference, KC and G2, Jensen?
Well, I mean, if I were to go back to my checklist, I think that when it comes to KC, they are not drafting very well. I don't think they understand the fearless format very well. Maybe the coach should play some Magic the Gathering. I don't know, but it's one of those situations where I felt that in all these games where it's one of those things to give to them Falco's props. But I think that this is one of those where if you were to sit someone over there and give them, once again, everything is a factor of time, right? Where you have 15 minutes and you're going to the next one, how much risk are you willing to take? Or how much ability do you have to really spot the mistake in the moment and say that this is where they broke the rules of what a good draft is, and this is how we're going to punish it? And then, of course, how much is KC just relying on Gustav Gumbo, right? This is their unbeatable bot lane. We're going to go Senna Yasuo, but then the rest of the draft doesn't really piece together when they do the Jace and the Diana over there. So that's where I feel that this is opportunistic and being able to exploit things, right? It's like why when you hear chess players, they talk about when they play against the computers and they play against AI, they cannot play against them as if they're playing against another human being. They have to play an exploitative way where they have to play anti-computer chess, and then there's some elements of that where they are trying to force the computers to create and make mistakes, and that style of chess is going to be different. Or I think there was this interview where Magnus Carlsen was talking about how he was playing against these younger players who have these opening theory, like 30, 40 moves in. And he said the strategy was to just create very tactically rich opportunities and put them into situations where they're uncomfortable. And that's what Fearless is doing, right? And I would say that K Corp in this case is this they have they have a solid roster, right? They have players like Kana, Vladi. I think a lot of people highlight him from the previous season. And I think he's showing his worth in terms of execution as a player as well. They have a they don't necessarily have so they have these players who are very comfortable when it comes to executing the good stuff champions, but because of their lack of familiarity, once we start to need them to dig deeper into the champion pool, once you require the coaching stuff to go
Yeah,
deeper, that's where they start to run into problems. And you can't exactly put it on the coaching staff as well, because when it comes to draft, you're always kind of limited by what your players are going to be
sure.
willing to play.
By the way, on two quick things on that as well. One of the best examples of this was the fucking game 4, because that was like, haha, now I have a Draven. It's like, yeah, enjoy this comp, motherfucker. Like, holy shit, that's some nightmare fuel. Like, I just feel bad for Calista even in that game, mate. Like, again, you came into that game down 0-1 and you had to win 3-1 in this analogy. Like that's a fucking impossible game. And then the other one is, you actually nailed it on that one, which is one of the actual sleeper best players of the split was Kana, but he obviously plays his, like, limited champion, but he never even got to play League of Legends in this series. He's just playing all the shit he doesn't play. Like, what? So, yeah, the Carmine Corp was just cut off at the knees. Right, let's go to... well, go on. Do you have a point, Peter?
Yeah, no. I just say just to be quickly, like the Magnus Carlsen thing, I think is a good analogy. Basically, Magnus Carlsen was saying that sometimes you make a suboptimal play. So he's saying, like, if you just make the optimal play for the first 30, 40 moves, these guys can be in their prep and they can be very comfortable. But sometimes it's better. It improves your chance to win to just make a suboptimal move around move 20 or something and just put them out of their prep. So I think that's fair against a team of rookies. I think it's very good. I think also, like, just for the KC thing, I think game 4 they were just outdrafted, right? But game 3. I think in the draft, this is the Senna Yasuo draft, right? Like, I think this is a draft you can play at ERL level, right? You have Senna Yasuo as your bot lane, very like good 2v2 bot lane. You have Diana, which is combos with the Yasuo. So now that you've got a Diana and you've got your Senna Yasuo, you need priority from mid to protect your Diana in the early game. So you go Jace, and then you have an Ornn final pick. The problem with this is you're playing it into G2, and it means that Kana, who is one of your most important areas of pressure, is stuck on an Ornn. And not able to influence the game in the way that he's normally able to influence, right? So I think that if I was an ERL coach and if I was coaching K Corp in 2020, K Corp Blue, the ERL team, and I saw this as a K Corp Blue draft, I would think K Corp Blue would definitely win this game. 100% they win this game, right? But you can't do, like, what you can do at an ERL level when you are the team with the superior players is not what you can do at LEC level when you have, let's be generous and say that they're similar level of players, right? Maybe G2 obviously higher, but let's say they're close in level, right? So you could do that when you're bullying another team, but not when you're not. Okay, and that's what I would say for that.
Since my good point was going to be Dylan Falco draft diff, I'll just pivot, and there's an obvious one I'll do here, which is the whole hype, like I built up on the last episode, of Calist going this far in his rookie playoffs, and can they make the finals, and the romance of that, and is he already, like, can he be the best ADC in his first split? It's like, he got to face the current final boss of ADC, Hans Sama, and Hans Sama is so fucking back. He is so back. And remember, this is even a guy himself where sometimes they would play, like, I thought, quite, like, cynical local draft pools around him in normal metas where he just played his 2 or 3 champions. He got them every time. He tried to smash the lane. They grouped around it. It was a dream, by the way, for any ADC. Like I can tell you, people like the opposites of the world wish they'd have been inserted into those G2 teams the last few years. That's where you would get to be the MVP all the time. So if you look at these series, the guy's just cut fucking back, mate. And he's even playing like champions. You wouldn't necessarily even associate with him. He's just looking awesome. So what are the thoughts on Hans Sama, guys? Go on, Jensen. In theory, you go each time after each person, so go on.
Well, so I don't have a lot to add on Hans Sama itself. So he's definitely been playing well, and I think that this is one of the things where I'm just going to tie it back into the point with regards to how do we set up players for success? How do we set up players for innovation, right? And I think that this has always been the strength of G2, where it's one of those how much do you start off in terms of the laundry list, right? So G2 this year they're integrating 2 new players, so they need to reintegrate 2 new players into the team's culture and the team system. But of course, I think that this has been always been the biggest factor when it comes to G2. How does G2 keep staying winning? Is because there's definitely has to be some of the secret sauce in terms of the team culture and being able to accelerate people through that process because they have figured out the formula already. They have Broken Blade, they have Caps who have been there for some time already. That is going to enable them to speed through a lot of the processes. And instead of spending time like BDS, where for the winter split, they're just going to be spending time on, once again, everything is a function of time, right? Where they have to spend time on, okay, this is how you learn Striker's style of teaching and playing League of Legends, right? Where you have to play on these 2 lanes, this is how you move on the map and stuff like that. The G2 guys, they know it already. The players, they can do peer-to-peer coaching and everything's very accelerated within that. In terms of getting the other 2 players up to speed with regards to that, it makes it very easy. And once everything, so the tide is rising as a whole, and you can feel that with this current iteration of G2, right? Fearless format didn't focus great at the drafts. You have the right veterans in place, and that is going to naturally elevate the level of play as a whole. So when people look at like why did Upset to the average person look so bad when he played for the Vitality roster and stuff like that, is because the tide isn't rising. The tide's completely out. The whole boat is beached on the shore, and in that case, it's very hard to shine as a player unless you have a very discerning eye to really say that these are the micro details and things that he's doing differently. And similarly, when things are going well, you can say that there's guys who can mask that up. At the same time, this is where the great players separate themselves from the good players, right? But the good players, they just kind of coast. They just kind of look kind of good. They put up the good KDAs and stuff like that. But this is where the great players, they are able to take those resources and really shine. And I think that that's what we're seeing with G2 at the moment, where they've created this rising tide. And now Han Sama is a good player. He's not just a good player, he's proving to us that he's a great player.
Sure. I agree. I think that also, I think he looks better because Labrov looks better too, which I think also has a knock-on impact.
Okay, right. If we go to the bad, I know technically you might have burned it earlier, so you can pick something else if you want. What would you say for your bad, Jensen? What are we taking here?
Well, I saved it because
go for it.
I still want to talk about the bad as well, right? Because this is where I want to go through the full checklist, right? Of why I think that these drafts end up being unbalanced. And when you have an unbalanced draft, you create exploits that people can go
Okay.
against you. Of course, this is not a hard and fast, but when I borrow this concept of unbalanced from poker, because it's this idea where if you take certain actions, it creates an unbalanced set of play, which means that you're exploitable. It doesn't mean that you will lose. It just means that it creates opportunities for exploits, because it dictates certain elements of your gameplay. Now, I'm not going to tease people anymore. I'm just going to go into the heart of it, right? So here's the checklist. For coaches out there, be it you're starting or people who are existing. Maybe I may be wrong, but this has worked for me. So this is Jensen's draft checklist. First one is you need at least 1+1 lane of agency. So the +1 means that if you don't have a natural second lane of agency, you're going to need a jungler with the ability to influence the lanes, which means that you need something like a Lee Sin, you need the Xin Zhao, you need a Jarvan. You cannot be going for something like a Diana or something that really wants to be doing a complete clear, right? And or this champion needs to be able to outfarm and outskirmish the opponent jungler as well, depending on what the meta is. So this is once again meta specific, but you need 1+1 lanes of agency. So checklist number 2, you are going to need a champion that is good on side lane. So this is where I mentioned that G2 kind of broke the rules with regards to that, because you are always going to need a champion that is independent enough where you do not need to have somebody always babysitting him, so that it makes it difficult for the opponents to call your bluff. Something like an Akali, something like a LeBlanc, or usually a Camille Fiora, something that we've seen throughout the metas. The Sante has very conveniently been a tank that has been a very independent on side lane kind of tank champion as well. Checklist item number 3. You're going to need mixed damage threats. I think this is the thing that most people are able to take off, where people always go, oh, you drafted a full AP combo. LOL, we bought milk threats, you lose the game, right? But this isn't just about the damage type. Is that if you want to be looking at taking team fights, you're going to need a range finder, so something with a decent amount of range, and a haymaker. Right, so like how in boxing and fights and stuff like that, you got to be able to throw the jabs to be able to find your range. So something with a decent amount of range, that you don't get completely outpoked, and something that when the opponent comes in close to grapple, you have the ability to do terrible damage to them. And of course, the checklist item number 4 is that your composition has to be in theme. And now this is where I tie this entire checklist back into my lenses of the game. Are we playing for a map control style of game, which is where K Corp Seraphine broke that rule? I drafted Ryze and Viego. This is very clearly I'm trying to play Go and B style of League of Legends. I need a high activity support with the ability to engage and lock people down. We are playing a 2-lane pick composition, right? You don't go for the Seraphine in that scenario. If I'm going for the likes of an Asriel Azir or something like that Genji might do, then I'm going to need to pick a support that's going to be able to facilitate Asriel in really hard bullying the mid lane so that we can achieve mid prior through that with the range advantage, right?
Mhm.
So the composition has to be in team. And of course, there are things that you can do to kind of compensate for these things when you don't follow this checklist. But when you have that, it creates a balanced team composition, and it removes the opportunities for people to really exploit that. And I think that, and when I see some of these teams draft, especially K-pop, I feel that they don't really obey the rules of that I would have established for myself in that scenario.
What would you have gone with Draven into Kate LeBron? Would you have gone like Bard or Pike or something like this, or
Bard,
would you have gone
yeah,
Bard?
Bard or
Oh,
Pike.
okay, I get it. Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense.
Rakan, I don't think Rakan was available anymore,
Rakan was
right?
bad.
In the
Rakan
corner
was bad.
side.
Rakan was bad. Rakan was
Yeah.
like it would have had to be. I mean, I think I don't think you should like. I don't think Renata was an option into Caitlyn Braun, but I think you could definitely go Pike or Bard for sure, for sure.
Hmm?
All right, what are your thoughts then, Peter?
Um, yeah, I mean, I think I've talked a bit about KC drafting before. I think it's just you don't have to get the perfect draft to win a game, but I think KC just thought that their range was higher than it was. So I mean, like, you could take a 40-60 draft. Like sometimes it's worth gambling for a draft that can be an 80-20, but it could either be a 40-60 or an 80-20 draft, right? If you think that even if we get a 40-60 draft, we can still beat the other team. And I think KC went for a lot of gambles in that series, and I think that they didn't pay off. I think that I'm less critical of KC because I've followed the players on this team for a long time, and I know where this drafting comes from. It comes from players that have been smashing people at ERLs, thinking that they can do it at LEC. When I compare KC to the drafts of, like, let's say, Heretics, right? Like if I go and look at, like, KC at least know what their win condition is, right? They're going to do something weird on bot. Well, against G2, their plan was to do something weird on bot lane. Didn't work out. If they play G2 again, I'm sure they'll have a new plan. But at least they know who's innovating. At least I just think the information was incorrect on how much innovation they could get away with. If I look at Heretics, for instance, though, Heretics, obviously they lost to Fnatic, but they had a series against Giant X. Giant X will be my bad point, but I mentioned Heretics because against Giant X, Heretics are a team that always get behind in the early game, and they rely heavily on Stend to be on some form of engage to get them back into the game. And in this series against Giant X, they lose the game because in game one, he's on Elise, which is fine. You can pick Elise. Like, Elise is not a bad champion. But if you are Heretics, you shouldn't be playing Ezreal Elise, right? Like, because Elise is a champion which will get you a small cumulative advantage, right? Even if it's on paper good for the draft. If you are this team, you should not draft this because Stend, the only advantage Stend is going to be able to get on that champion is in the 2v2 laning phase where he's going to get like a marginal edge.
Do you feel like
if the rest of your team falls behind, he cannot salvage you for the rest of the game? Okay, game 2, he's on, I think he was on Rel. Yeah, he was on Rel. And sure, great. They get behind early. He's able to get them back in the game. And then you think, okay, Giantech's on the ropes. What are they going to do in the final game? They are going to, then they blind pick for their person that they need to be on engage. They blind pick Lulu 1-2 in the final game against Giantech, putting their not their best player, but their most important player on a champion 2 games out of 3 where he can't do anything on the map for 2 out of the 3 games, right? So I think that I kind of agree with Jensen's point, but I have a little bit more sympathy for K-Corp because I think K-Corp at least understand how their team is supposed to win in the same way that BDS. You know, I think BDS and K-Corp have clear ideas over this is what we want and this is what we need to win. It's just that, there's for a Magic the Gathering analogy, their siege rhinos were locked to the hierarchs, right? For all you Magic the Gathering fans out there. Whereas like I think that there are teams out there who are playing in playoffs who don't know what their win condition is, like who don't understand what it is that helps them to win games of League of Legends, and they just try too much to win draft. And I think that is a problem. And that's kind of my pushback a little bit. I agree, Jensen, with what you're saying on this, but I don't think every single team can always, like, I think sometimes you need all of these things on your checklist, and your checklist is correct. But sometimes you just have to be willing to take a bit of a loss because one player is so important to the success of your team. And on Heretics, I think that's Stend. And you sometimes you just have to take the hit, right? Yeah, that's all I would say on that. But I think that, the Seraphine pick, I agree, is garbage, especially Seraphine Scion. Like the game 4 draft was awful. But I think the number of times they've picked Draven Seraphine at ERLs and won, or Draven Lulu or something like this. Right? I can't remember exactly what Targamas was picking, but the number of times where they picked Draven plus range champions, at least in scrims, with Targamas and Kalist and got away with it is very, very high. But obviously it didn't work here.
By the way,
Well,
go on.
I mean,
Yeah, go on.
yeah, so that's the type of thing where I didn't watch them play in the ERLs, right? So I don't really know what the other conditions they had when they had the success with the Driven Seraphine. And this is the type of thing where, well, before I became a coach, I used to be a shoutcaster, and then we would like do all these like road shows for League of Legends for Garena back in the day, and we would have to like promote League of Legends. And this is one of the analogies that I would use to explain draft to people. Where draft is basically you're kind of like cooking a dish, but it's like the mystery box challenge that you see in Master Chef, but you and your opponents are picking ingredients from the mystery box at the same time. So what's happening here is that you need a very solid understanding of the fundamentals of how flavors work together. And when people just remember what the best hits and the best combinations were without recalling what are the other factors that are needed to set these things up to succeed, right? They end up going like, okay, I'm supposed to cook a Thai dish. Thai dishes are supposed to be spicy, and they just put the spiciest things possible into the dish
Okay.
itself. It's not going to taste good, right? Because the heat is supposed to elevate the other flavors, and you just end up something that's completely inedible. And that's what it felt like, right? But the Draven Seraphine might have worked for them in certain scenarios, but you need the other factors of what the other three champions are to be there in order for this to succeed. And maybe that's what the Rise Viego was trying to do, something that's able to shove in the mid wave and then get these dives happening on the bot lane together with the Draven Seraphine. Perhaps that's what they should be looking for. Then maybe the Viego should have been something with a bit more dive capability, right? So I don't know the draft off the top of my head, so I don't really recall. So that's one of the harder things about doing analysis in the Fearless era is like, wait, what were the 30, 40 champions that were no longer available by this point of time? But that's where what I'm thinking about here, right? Okay, but you got to cook the dish is about okay, the heat here is supposed to complement the savoriness, or is it the savoriness is supposed to take the center stage, or were they doing Draven Seraphine so they could just enable bot lane to then enable something else on the map?
Yep.
And then in that case, is you have a sign on the top lane. So what are you even doing?
Sure, I agree.
By the way, I just like the way like Jensen is so like into league drafting that he actually thinks the fans are with bated breath. Like, right, I'll stop teasing you guys now. Here are my 4 rules of drafting in Fearless. Everyone's like, the fuck? I forgot he was even talking about that. So, no, listen, it was brilliant for you. All the coaches will be vibing with it. And then all I'll say is, I just actually very briefly want to touch on the thing you said before, the Magnus Carlsen theory that you'll play a suboptimal play. Like, this is actually a thing that is also mega underrated. Is a lot of people, this is why I hate the fact in League of Legends. I always tell people the fact that in League of Legends, people do actually have the same flaw that all the chess players who are the noobs who want to get high on the ladder without being good at chess have, which is they just study openings and try to get the perfect opening. And then they go, right, now I'm in the mid game with the lead. Now I can win the game, because you can almost trip over and win a game there. And so what they don't understand is one of the best things about League of Legends, it's how you can actually tell a truly great veteran, in my opinion, is they can play from behind. They can play in fucked up scenarios. They can play like comps that don't make sense. The guy who has to have his pick, lead in lane, resources, transferred into the correct like object, like, mate, you're playing the game in such a fragile way. If anything goes wrong along that way, you're not even going to be prepared to play. It's actually why the genius of what Magnus Carlsen is saying there is, look, you could in theory play against suboptimal player by just playing a wide variety of opponents, right? But the genius here is this: when you play the guy who's doing the suboptimal play by playing a bad player, he also won't necessarily be able to punish you when he makes the suboptimal player. The elite player who makes the suboptimal player, and then you're in like essentially a different branch of the fucking flowchart you didn't even know existed. He's now an elite player. He can actually like absolutely ram it down your throat that like we're just playing chaos style at this point in time. No one knows what the fuck's going on in the draft. No one knows what's going on in the game. Like let's just I don't even know what the next macro move is. Let's find out. Let's just find out together. Let's go on this journey. So yeah, I think that's a good one. Right, let's go to it's actually Peter's bad point now.
Okay, my bad point. So my bad point is I really, really hate how GX have prepped for these best of threes. And I mean, we can give them, we can let slide what happened in the first round. You know, where they were against G2 and they got murdered. Which okay, fine. Whatever.
Everyone did.
Yeah, everyone did. The fact Casey managed to get one win was good, but I really, really dislike how they prepped into Heretics and how they prepped into Koi. I will say Heretics, I think they got that series because Heretics in game 3 had a misunderstanding over what they needed to do to win games. And I think basically, Heretics actually got a win against GX by playing to Carlsen, not Magnus Carlsen, the League of Legends players champion pool, which GX basically just gave him like a god tier Camille draft, right, for free. But what I would say about GX is people were flaming Guilhoto for saying, oh, we didn't even think about Vex top as a pick.
Sure.
I have sympathy for Guilhoto on the Vex top because, frankly, Merwin plays all kinds of garbage in solo queue, and you cannot just prepare for every single garbage pick he's picking in solo queue. This is why I like him so much, by the way. He will play trash, and he just doesn't care, right? He's perfectly fine to run down challenges and GM games like Baus, and he just doesn't care, right? Like, he just doesn't give a shit. He's gonna get his games in. So you can't always respect what Merwin is playing in champion in solo queue. So I have sympathy for Guilhoto on that. What I don't have sympathy for Guilhoto is to allow. So the key matchup in GX versus Koi is going to be mid jungle, right? It's not going to be like you're going to have Lot and Merwin kind of staring at each other, but it's top lane. Sure, Vex isn't going to blast you in the early game, right? Bot lane is going to be kind of a wash, but what really, really matters if GX want to win against a team like Koi, going later into the year, is how Closer and Jackie's match up into Eluria and Jojo, right? And to give Jojo, Yone, and Azir for free in a series like this is just unacceptable, right? Like you at least have to make him show you something, right? Like, I mean, what they did is they picked Lee Sin into Yone, which is, by the way, like a really, really, like, this was not a good draft to play Lee Sin in.
Right?
Like, yeah, I mean, you can play Lee Sin into Yone, but not
right.
when the other champions on the team are like Ezreal, Vex, and like Rakan. You can't pick Lee Sin in that situation, right? So they put Jackie's on on a situation where he's kind of semi disrespecting Jojo, then they think, okay, we can go and pick into Yone. I think this is Jackie saying, I want to innovate in this way, and coaching staff basically just allowing him to do it. But then there are two champions that Jojo has shown like significant, really, really good proficiency on this year, which is Azir and Yone. And maybe you give Yone game one, you think, okay, we'll give him one of his picks, it's out for the rest of the series, but you can't then give him Azir game two. And he was pretty good in the series. Like people are focusing, El Yoyo got mega fed game two, but how did he get mega fed on his Nidalee? He got mega fed because Jojo is got in advantages with Azir, which Nidalee is then able to capitalize on, right? And they're picking like Orianna into Azir, which is Orianna can get priority into Azir. It's possible, but as soon as Azir hits 6, you will die to every single gank, right? And he was even dying before those moments. And to me, I can't understand how you can go into a series like this, give the person on the other team who's struggling the most his 2 comfort picks, and then give an interview afterwards where you go and say, "Oh, we didn't even consider this cheese pick that this guy's played in solo queue," even if you're not respecting the pick. Which, to be fair, if I was against Merwin, I wouldn't respect the pick either. Your fans don't want to hear that you didn't do proper prep, right? Like that is like the worst thing that you can come and say, because I mean, like, I may not think that their prep on Merwin matters, but I do think that their prep on Jojo mattered. And I do think that their prep on Carlson mattered, and I do think that their prep on Shio mattered against Heretics, right? So for me, I think GX are going to be really, really glad when this Fearless experiment is over. They can go back to playing their standard picks. But I think they've really, really struggled when they've gone into the best of 3, because I don't think they've fully grasped what this format entails, and I think also the veterans on GX haven't been the ones that are willing to innovate. They're putting the pressure on the rookie to innovate. Well, Jackie's second year thing, and the information Jackie's has, in the same way that the information that Kalist has, isn't accurate yet, because they don't have enough experience of it played at the highest level. That's what I would say on GX.
It's you, mate.
Okay, so I've worked with Guilhoto for a year. So while I was working for models, I think this is in 2021, 2020. I don't recall already. It's all blurred. It's 2021, correct? Right,
Yeah,
right in the middle of the pandemic. That's when I was working with him, and I think that when I saw that he was coaching this team, and I saw the roster that he had, it's of course this is all just being so far away in the world. I don't have any inside information as to what's going on over there, but Guilhoto is a personality. The way he runs teams is definitely a very interesting way in which he handles his players. And I think that one of the things that he does very well, that Peter does very well as well, is play defense for his players, right?
yeah,
And we've seen him come up, and 2 times he has made very public statements that I think have kind of gone semi, I wouldn't say viral, but at least around. It's been a hot topic issue, right? Like, how can he say such a thing when he
yeah,
went after G2 at the start of the season, and then this time around when they talked about something that people were saying that, oh, you should definitely have known that this is something that Merwin's capable of, and in terms of the prep that he's having. And I think that is, once again, is the whole winter split thinking, right?
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
how much of this is you trying to get his means of influence onto the team? One of the other thing that people don't really realize about coaching is that at its very core, it's about influence. How do you get people to buy into your ideas? How do you get people to be on the same page as you? And I think that that's one of the ways where I think what I like to call is the hot pan analogy, where for some people they have to touch the frying pan to know that it's hot, right?
yeah,
And maybe that's his style of coaching as well. It's like, if you don't fully grasp my ideas, I can tell you a few times that you're wrong, and this is why you're wrong, and this is why this is the way to do it. But if you're gonna insist, I'm not gonna fight you on it, right? The pan is hot, go ahead, touch it, right? And then it's like, that hurts, right? It hurts good, right? Now
yeah,
maybe you listen to me. So maybe there's a little bit of that that's happening as well as a bit of teething issues. And I think that with seeing what happened with Noah and June with their previous coach on Fnatic when they had the whole breaking the team lines and coming out of like, oh, well, we're gonna blame these people for the bad drafts and stuff like that. How much of that is effective when it comes to managing these style things, right? And I have to say credit to him for coming out to take the heat in such a scenario. How much of this is like if we try to peel back the layers, where's the speculation? How much of
Good
this
point.
is the team not fully buying into this? And of course, Guilhoto, I know he knows the LPL style of play. He
Yeah.
knows how to coach and teach the two lane style of play. And he's a very smart, brilliant guy as well. So it's all just pure speculation, but that's
Okay.
where I'll give him the benefit of the doubt in this case.
So do you think he's just playing defense for Jackie's? Because that could have just been it. It could have just been Jackie's just disrespecting JoJo. And it's
Yeah.
like this is Guilhoto saying, "Stop disrespecting like somebody, like stop disrespecting JoJo." Because I could genuinely believe that that's why he did it. But it looks really bad from the outside. I'll be honest.
I will say, if people don't know, Guilhoto, if you ever watch my reflections with him, because he's quite open about his time in Team Liquid, he will actually, if people don't get this, people see him as like, he obviously, by the way, vibes like the whole Jose Mourinho approach of like your big bombastic comments, you big up your players, you never make it seem like there's a weakness, we've always got a chance, boys. But he also plays defense, he takes it all on himself as well. Like I've heard not only the craziest one, this is where he's very different than people think he's not outspoken, he's calculated as to when he trash talks. In Team Liquid, in Split 1, they took the draft away from him. He never said anything until like 3 years later in an interview with me. Bro, at a minimum, every core channel would at least be like DMing people, analyst people in the scene, get speculation going. You do something, or you just say it with the second you leave the team. Like, I didn't even get a chance to handicap me. And also, even though, this is that well legit guy this guy is, he's so stand-up that even when he had the draft taken away from himself and he would lose with that super team in LCS, he would himself go, I think, into their Discord and just be the direct point of contact to the fans, where they were basically able to grill him about shit he didn't even decide, and he would just sort of take it all on the chin. Which, look, I'm sort of a person, I don't ever tell like the white light, etc. But if you're going to be in that world, that is one of the like political aspects of coaching. I have bad respect for people who do that. So you are right. For all we know, this is just sort of saying like, no, I fucked up. Yes, I don't understand that JoJo Beyond plays these two. Give me a break. Like, and you're just hoping Jackie's sat there like, you see what I'm fucking doing here, mate? Give me a break, you know? So I agree with that. That's a good angle. Also, the other reason I did think, listen, it depends whether or not it was Jackie's one or not. The reason why it's criminal is this, because as you said, what we need to do is not let JoJo be on your in his ear. They're even Jackie's fucking picks. Can he play these picks in the series, please? Like, you're the one who's a demon on those picks, because just like I always say about Fnatic, if I have GX's team, my number one goal is get Jackie's on one of his best champions and let him have a chance to carry the game, give him agency. But I'm wearing the fucking number 9 jersey for England now. Do you think I enjoy the fact that when I watch them play, they never fucking service the ball to Harry Kane? His whole shit is just fucking scoring in the box. Like, why is he dropping deep, playing the work rate midfield, and then like not getting a shot on goal? Like, we may as well not have him in the team, mate. You know what I mean? At that point in time, you have a start, you build your game around them. Also, you're not playing against G2 in this game, mate. Like, it's not like, oh no, they're going to know what we're going to do. Yeah, it works. Just fucking do it. It just works, doesn't it? And then lastly, what's the last thing actually? No, that'll do. That's good. This actually leads into my bad point though, which is perfect. You've set me up perfectly, which is now the whole Guilhoto like downfall prediction of G2 will just become a meme in history, right? It will just be remembered as like, lol. But here's my problem. It's the way it's going to be remembered that is really doing my nut in, as we say in England, which is it's not going to be remembered as where he did pre-fight trash talk to hype it up. It didn't work and he got knocked out. It's going to be remembered as he's a moron. He never knew what he was talking about. And forever, this will be like the albatross around his neck. Like, what an idiot. He's the guy that said G2 would fall down. Because there's 2 angles I've got for you on this one. So one goes like this. One is that, first of all, I actually think surely if you are a G2 player, a G2 coach, or a G2 fan, you actually indirectly should love Guilhoto. He made your rise so much cooler. Imagine, I said this on Some of the Insight, if instead the first 3 weeks of LEC was, don't worry about that G2 loss where they look dodgy as fucking week 1. Don't worry about them being like, whatever it was, like fucking 2 and 3 or whatever. Don't worry about any of it. It's G2, they'll course correct, they'll get back. It doesn't count till the playoffs anyway. Who gives a fuck if they lost a lane here? That wouldn't even be cool now now that they're number one again. The reason it was cool is by the time we got to the playoffs, all the narratives had amassed so that you all thought like they weren't even necessarily number two even, or is Fnatic going to beat them? Every conversation was about Mickey Xing. That made the league fucking dope. Like Guilhoto actually carried some of the narratives of this league with that one interview. And then also, I do want it to be where people can sort of take chances like that and create and stimulate fun conversations. And also, lastly, I'll just put this out there as well. I don't actually buy that he just said that and then G2 magically was like demon mode activated, like all electricity coming out the right. That's part of it. Like when you're a veteran team, the hardest thing ever is how do you, in a football analogy, if you're the number one team leading the league, how do you get into a game against fucking like Leicester City? You know what I mean? That's the one where you go, we can coast on it. Who even gives a shit if we lose? Like that's why undefeated splits are almost impossible. Because it's how do you get them to lock in like it's the LEC final when it's the equivalent of like you're playing SK. That's why you will see randomly, Rogue hasn't been good for years, but they'll always get some bullshit win over like a top team because of this fact that everyone goes, it's fucking Rogue, they're trash anyway, we'll probably beat them all in scrims anyway. So I think like a really underestimated part is, I think this did absolutely fucking fire up the G2 players. I'll give you a very quick analogy. There's a weird story people tell as a success story in life that I've never understood because it contains within itself an obvious sort of like contradiction, which goes like this. Someone will go, oh yeah, I was in the worst place of my life. I was out of weight. I was 300 pounds. I lost my job. You know, I was kind of depressed, quite frankly. I wasn't fun to be around. And my wife, she just took the kids. She left. She found another guy. Well, you know what? I've been in the gym since then. I'm fucking, look at this. This is what she's missing. I've got my own little job. I started a business. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm dating this new like 25-year-old woman. She's way better anyway. Yeah, well, this is what you're missing, love. It's like, that isn't what she's missing. You just admitted yourself there. You only did all that shit because she left. That was the breaking point. It was when she left that you had to go, fuck, I've hit rock bottom now, haven't I? I better fucking get my shit together. I think in a weird way, if no one had said anything, here's the analogy. You know all those great stories in like football and fucking basketball where it's like, and then Michael Jordan was having an all right game. So then the guy who was like the rookie having a good game was like, hey, Mike, I guess you're not the fucking best anymore. And then it's like, and then he scored 40 points and won the game. And you're like, why did you say that to him? Like people think that's like a meme. No, like in this analogy, like you'd almost have been better as a league getting together a cartel, the anti-G2 cartel. And all you do every week after those games is go, you guys almost had us. You know what? I still think you're going to win the league. That would have like actually fucking like soft sold them. They might have actually continued this shit at least in round one of the bloody playoffs, which either way it happened to be playing you. And spoiler, the game against you, that was like a fucking exhibition. They fucking tortured you in that game. So essentially the bad point is just, it's not even the trash talk. Absolutely meme on people who trash talk. Trash talk, by the way, absolutely almost obliges you to trash talk back and to slam the person if they're wrong. But let's understand, it was like, I think it add value to the league. I'm glad that trash talk happened. I think it'd be way worse if it didn't. I hope people don't remember it sort of the wrong way.
Yep. You want to go first, Jason? Go for it.
Yeah, I mean, I've talked about Guilhoto already, right? So it's one of those that I think this guy is very good. He's very good as a coach. He brings the quality that a lot of coaches. So you have like your Dylan Falcos who are like the strategic kind of genius, and they're very good at coordinating the strategic elements of a team. Guilhoto is very good at being the heart and soul of a team. If you have the right players, I think he's a very European coach for European players as well, right? And there are reasons why I think he could have succeeded more in NA, but I think the European culture is exactly where he is. The way he gives feedback to players, the way he trash talks, and his trash talk, he even trash talks his own players as well in a very calculated manner. He knows what he's doing, right?
Yeah.
If you talk to some of his ex-players, they'll come up with these insane stories about the shit that he'll say to them, but it's like, oh, Guillermo say these things to me and I completely lost my confidence. It's like he said these things to me and it made me think about something. It made me realize something.
I think
about
he even said he
myself.
challenges people in practices and stuff, and like we'll have like an argument with people and stuff. Yeah.
Yep. I mean, I think people forget that he was top 4 in EU Masters, right? Last split with Heretics, but with the Heretics ERL team that was like had a lot of like proper rookies on it, right? So it was he did a good job last split. I think my one criticism of Guilhoto is that him and I think Grabs is another one like this. They go out and they bat very, very hard for their players. And like sometimes as a coach, if you do that, you get clowned on Like another one is Pad, with the Hylissang making space. I'm not even going to talk about Vitality for this playoffs because holy moly. But sometimes you could go out there, put yourself out there, and your players can think, oh, well, I deserve to be treated in this way, and they sometimes believe the story that the coach is saying to the public.
Right.
And I hope that Excel, I don't think that Guilhoto is the one forcing Jackies to play Lee Sin into Jojo Jone, right? And I hope that the lesson that people learn from this split in Excel is not Guilhoto is going to take the heat for me so I can fuck around. It's like Guilhoto is going to take the heat for me. He's looking like a clown to the public, so I better pull my trousers up and go get to work, right? Because otherwise he's going to be left out to dry, and that to me would be rough because I don't think he's the one. Like, to be clear, when I'm criticizing Giant X, I don't think it's on Guilhoto. I think it's on Jackies against Koi, and I think it's on the entire team just thinking Heretics is trash and not bothering to do any prep against Heretics. And I don't think that is all. Maybe you could say it's a little bit on the coach, but I think that that's primarily a player thing, right, rather than the coach.
Yes. By the way, I do appreciate, though, that actually Jensen has done the 2 Spider-Mans meetings, and he's actually given Peter a feeling of what it's like to make a good critical point. And then someone I'm going to play defense, actually. Maybe there was another reason why, and besides, players are inexperienced, and we've got to give them time. And actually, let's talk on the bright side. It's like, fuck, I'm trying to land the point here. Yeah, I'm trying to land it, bro. Okay, right, let's go to the ugly points, then, though. So, Jensen, what is your ugly point?
Team fighting. I think this has been one of the things ever since the map changed when they introduced the Articon as well. It's one of those things where I feel that as coaching staff, this is the bread and butter of League of Legends, right? Team fighting. How do you set up for team fights? How do you control the line bush? And what is everybody's job? Right. So the way I like to think about it is what's the structure of how do you control the architecture of the map, and what is the jobs of each player? And when I'm watching these LEC games, it looks horrid in terms of people. I'm just seeing people in these team fights not knowing what their job is supposed to be. People are just randomly starting to hit the Drake. People are standing in the wrong part of mid lane. Well, I could be wrong, right? And this is one of the challenges. Why I call it ugly and not why I chose this as my ugly and not the bad is because this is my perception. To me, this is ugly. Beauty's in the eye of the beholder. So in Jensen's world of League of Legends, who hasn't been cooking in the kitchen for 2 years now, it seems wrong, right? I don't know what the right answer is supposed to be because the map has changed so much and I don't have a team to work things around and talk to players and if you stand over here, you actually don't get the pocket of vision over here and they can hit you from this angle and stuff like that. But I can just tell by just looking at things, people don't understand what the structure is supposed to be. They don't know what their role is supposed to be in these neutral objective team fights. And I'm not completely surprised given though that it took Western teams 11 years to learn that if you just stand in certain places, the old choke that people will always follow into and die when they played against the Eastern teams was something that you have to control in order to win games. And so I'm not entirely surprised that the structure and roles aren't there, but it's ugly, right, when I look at it.
Do you want to call out a specific team, or do you want to say the whole league as a whole?
I think there's a particular apparent in the Mad Lions Koi versus KC game, and I think that this was also a little bit apparent in BDS as well. So when I'm looking at these two teams, this is where I was looking. It's like I don't think these guys know their job. There was one particular situation when Nuke was playing the Syndra and he's just fishing with the Syndra E against what Fnatic had. It's like you cannot do that against Pantheon Leona, right? Like you have one job, it's to wait for the Pantheon Leona to come in and you gotta hold that E as if your life depended on it, and he's just fishing out the E over there. It's like these guys don't know their jobs in this game, and that's the part of me where I looked at it. It's like maybe they know something that I don't. Like I said, it's not necessarily bad. It just looks really ugly to me.
No, I think that's fair. Yeah, I mean, I'll talk about BDS afterwards, but I think that for sure there are. I think a little bit of it is growing pains at the start of the year, but definitely there have been. I think that it really, really hurts in Fearless because you don't have the time to drill these comps as aggressively as you should. And, sometimes people just forget how, like, you need to put a lot of time into playing Ivan to know how to play Ivan. But if you're in Fearless, where you need to put time into Ivan, and then you need to put time into Siva, and then you need to put time into MF and things, like, you don't have time to fix all of these things. But definitely the team fighting quality in EU has definitely gone down the split. I agree with you, and I think it's going to really hurt versus international competition. Even if G2 go, because G2 will have, I think G2 are probably the best team fighting team in the league right now, and I think that, but I think that they're not being pushed much in the way that whoever goes from LPL, because the LPL finals hasn't happened yet, or I think HLE was
Yep, they're already gone.
Yeah. So they're going to be challenged in a different way that they're not prepared for. So I agree with you on this.
By the way, I'll even say,
even
oh, go on.
even in the game against K-Corp, right? The one game that they lost, that was the one of the Nocturne Aurora. The team fighting from GT in that fight against the Dragon, but I think that was they are the best team fighting thing, don't get me wrong. But if this is a standard of what the best team fighting team is, I have my concerns going to MSI, right? But you're right. Like I said, it's window split, so you don't want to qualify a team by its qualities, because this is the type of things where, as you approach the level of your competition, and this is maybe the type of things as they start to scrim international teams, they raise the bar. It's not been good.
One of the problems I have with this topic is it's actually why I know it must be a nightmare being a coach, because you try to like work on player performance, develop them into their role, figure out the communication systems, figure out the draft, which again, everyone treats like the chess opening, like it's the whole game, the draft is just the game. And then meanwhile, right, how are you supposed to spend all your time working on like longer term macro concepts and how we actually work off things, and like points that Jensen has, like here's my sort of like 3 guidelines for what I want us to do. Like that's like long-term coaching. So it's so hard to work that stuff in. So it means, unfortunately, you get these problems that occur season after season after season that make people just look shit if they're in the Western regions, basically. So one of them that I have always seen is when people fight around the neutral objectives, the amount of times the two teams get into a thing where they're just thinking about like where the kill pressure is and who's going to go first and who am I going to go on to and are we going to fight this and we're going to back, and they're not even thinking about stuff like, am I actually the one in control of the objective? Am I trying not to fight it? Am I trying to potentially just like threaten it? Or am I trying to like make it so that they're going to have to come and all group over here, etc.? And have I trimmed the midway? They forget like the bigger picture things, and it makes them look like noobs when they don't execute or they fuck up, basically. So I'll give you a quick concept, which is how I think players default when they're in these situations and they're overwhelmed with short-term and long-term sort of decision-making to do an immediate scenario, right? The equivalent to this in Counter-Strike would be, it's really hard to play disciplined in Counter-Strike because it's all about shooting people. So what you get is, if you want to play really disciplined, for example, like stay in like a site with like one person and just, you're just going to spot the enemy and you're not even going to engage him, you're just going to sort of call for us, we'll rotate back and then we have the fight and we can essentially play off on the other side. The problem you're going to have is, the longer that goes on in the round and the more that player's uncertain about what's happening and the greater the sort of tension of, is there going to be someone there? If someone peeks, he's going to be so tempted to just engage in a fight and just win the fight. And by the way, if he wins the fight, he's going to think, oh, perfect, I've solved the problem. By winning the fight, it doesn't matter. Now I can't be wrong. In League, when they do that posturing, bro, the amount of times I can tell the team where even the call would have been before, like, we're going to try not to fight this unless we get like a really amazing angle. And you can tell when the tension gets too much, the pressure gets too much, the way you resolve it is you just send it. You just go in. If you're one of those supports with a fucking Q, my God, we all know how you fucking get that tension going, don't we, boys? That's some fucking premature ejaculation shit there. You just send it, bro. Oh, I've got injured. What am I doing? Like, and by the way, there's never a good answer to that. Either now you just get killed on your own and everyone goes, what a moron. Or everyone goes in like some Leroy Jenkins shit, like, well, fucking hell, right, in we go. And say, we weren't even trying to fight this fight. Like, we didn't even need that dragon. Like, there's so many things that, again, if you're watching the game outside and you don't have that actual pressure and the feeling of being in the game, it looks so obvious what you should do. It's why the number one thing I had to always talk to Monty about, who knows way more about me than macro of the game, is I'd go, bro, years and years and years go by and people still just lose to a Baron dance every fucking time. Like, I don't understand this. I mean, he just explained that concept of like, yeah, but they're not thinking of like the bigger picture there. They're just thinking like, can I win this fight, basically? So no, I do think, unfortunately, like, people, and also it's not technically the objective, it's a monster, isn't it? But if you want to see a great example of this, Fnatic has veterans, some of the best players in the league, and holy fuck does Atakan just live in their brain, motherfuckers. They think that's like the win condition or something. Like, they've never met one they didn't want to fight. They've never fucking had one and not done some stupid shit shit with it. Like, bro, even a monster's just mind controlling these guys. Never mind, like, some Asian team with Doinby and some fucking Jawa wizardry on the map. I don't even know what they would do if they faced that. You want to say something, Peter?
Nope.
Oh, okay.
I think you covered it.
All good. Right, if we go now to your ugly point, Peter, what is it? I think we all know where this one's going.
Yeah. So my ugly point, I wanted to find like somebody to go really hard on this week. And my first thought was go on Hillisang, because I mean he basically cost Vitality again for the 10th time this week, but it's kind of just sad at this point. Like I don't even like get any like I didn't have any enjoyment of it to start with, but what am I adding that some random person on Reddit can't see? So the person I'm going to go on this week is 113, and 113 basically had like a god tier early game series against Fnatic. What is the correct terminology I want to use here? He basically made Razork his bitch for 3 games in a row. And basically Razork, obviously everyone knows that he's top 2 jungler in Europe at worst. You know, Leader last week was saying he thinks he's the best player in Europe, and this guy wrecked him in 3 games in a row in the early game. But 113 still has his issue. We're in the mid to late game, because we were talking about team fighting. He is unable to just stand there, not use his cooldowns, and just recognize that sometimes you just have to let other people be the main character and be there to disengage for them. And to me, it was really, really frustrating, because obviously, like, Striker is one of those guys that, like, I will always go to vouch for. And this guy brought in 113. When he brought in 113, I thought, okay, this is kind of a crazy, because obviously I'm a big Shio fan, right? So I was like, why has he brought in this guy? Like, something has gone wrong behind the scenes. But he had faith in this guy. He brought him in, and they almost beat Fnatic off the back of his early game performance. But he couldn't keep it together in the mid to late game again. And it's been like this for 3 years. And like, somebody needs to sit this guy down and just basically say, you are not the main character at 30 minutes in the game. Stop it. Like, don't hit the tower. Don't tower dive. If he doesn't tower dive, like in 2 of those games, they just win, right? And he was unable to play patient, and it cost the team. And Fnatic could easily just be gone by now. And you know, we're filming this on Friday, the 28th of February. So Fnatic Koi is about to happen in a few hours, and I'll be really, really curious to see how Fnatic rebound, because Fnatic shouldn't even be in this top 4. On the back of 113, they shouldn't be in this top 4 because of how well he played in the first 15 minutes of games. But they are in this top 4 because of 113 after the first 15 minutes of this game. And to me, that's ugly. And it's one of those situations where you just, you know, you're building, you're super excited for the upset, and then it turns out that it was just that way all along, and there was never any hope. And for me, that is, I've been critical of him, and I mean, yeah, I just wish that he could just. Either his coaches aren't sitting him down and talking about it, or he's just ignoring them. And to me, that is frustrating, because this is a player mechanically who should be a lot better than he is, and have been better than he is over the course of his career, but has never been able to fix his mid to late game issues. And that to me is frustrating, and that's my ugly point.
I'm gonna jump into this one a little bit, right? So we're gonna do a little bit of what would I do if I was his coach in this situation?
Yeah.
Because this is an issue that I've encountered before. Because I coach in the last few years I've been teaching the Do and B style League of Legends, where it's all about jungle support plus 1 activity, right? And what's causing him to make these exact same plays is the same thing that helps him be so successful, because when you have the numerical advantage and you start walking into the opponent's jungle, and you're playing against teams that don't have the jungle support connected, every time you see it, you just go, because you're going to have your team backing you up there, and you're just going, and that bloodthirstiness is what is going to create those leads for you, right? But it's like what you said, you need somebody to have the alarm clock go off in his brain and say that, okay, this phase of the game is over, we're in the team fighting part of the game right now, and it's all about the Baron Duns, it's all about the Dragon Duns. Or even in the scenario I was looking at, they push in the top wave, they sync the mid wave to the bot wave, there are multiple waves crashing at the same time. You just got to hold off in the scenario because you don't have the numbers advantage in this case. and just slow things down, and things will be fine for them. So it's a tough one because it's the same qualities that Bobby Striker looked at and said that this is what I want in my player, the player with the decisiveness to just go in whenever he sees it when we're in a good position. And then now we're going to a situation where you need the player who's calculated. It's like what Peter says, right? To realize that he's no longer the main character in the situation. So it's tough. It's tough. Probably is one of those things where you just got to get a teammate, maybe push around the responsibility a little bit, but to say that, okay, past this point, this person holds the leash now, right? When we're no longer playing the section up the map and control the jungle bound by bound phase of the game anymore. We are playing for dragon fights. We have the Baron. We don't need to do any of these things anymore. And then just make the game simple for him. Give the responsibility of the leash to somebody else. That's probably where I might go with it. And see how that works.
Yeah, by the way, I agree also that this is an ugly point. It's definitely not this is a bad guy. People are going to meme on him, unfortunately, because of past teams with high-profile teammates and when he's in LEC and think he was like a meme. This guy, by the way, clearly has talent. Like, he definitely has really strong fucking mechanics. He can definitely fight people. Like, he's got those fucking combat skills. And if you look, that's even one of the areas. I even get, like, self-made vibes from him in that sense. Like, you can tell this guy probably is a demon in fucking scrims. What are you talking about? He looks like the sort of guy who destroyed the first 8 minutes, a la self-made. But the problem he has is, if you saw in this split, well, he started out, they just had him on bloody Sejuani duty for like a million fucking games to begin with. So if that's not even emphasizing his skill set. Like, this is the guy where, if you don't know, Viego just is his champion. Like, he'd probably play that in every matchup if you gave it to him. But I can see why, because if you unleash him, he actually can. Like you said, by the way, do you know how many people in Europe could even if you told them where Razok was going to path, they couldn't fucking beat him in the first early game of all 3 games. He's also got like the craziest hands imaginable. So I thought that was kind of baller. In fact, that's even the reason why Striker has obviously done that thing where I've worked with this guy in the past, I can see an angle no one else can see on him. He's obviously bringing him here to unleash him and to put him out like that. But the problem is, I agree, if you look later in the game, he definitely was not capable of like carrying the lead or fucking finishing the game and closing it out, etc. That made him look bad. And sadly, I do think fans will just look at him and then blame him for that. Like, you were the one who fucked it up. Like, nah, yeah, but he's also the one that got you into that position. That's one thing I also think you have to say, right? If you're going to say someone through a game, please mention that they carried it before that and got you into the position to throw the game. Like, you have to give the good and the bad. Like, that's like someone scored an own goal, but he also did score a goal as well. Like, that's fucking really valuable. Like, it's not easy to just trip over and score goals. So, no, I'm with you. That's a good one. That's a good one. Yep. It also does lead into my ugly point, which will be the end of the show, which is the same series from the other direction. So I'll do the meme that everyone's done, because it's a really pithy way to say it. Fnatic just won a series 2-1 where they actually lost all 3 games spiritually. Like, what? What? Like, bro, if I'm in that series and I'm some of those Nuke, Ice, etc., I'm even looking at Nuke. Like, again, look, I'll do the same thing I just said there about 1-1-3. You carried some of the games to get to that point. But then, holy fuck, did you throw a mean fastball to the other team and the other the fucking catcher in this analogy? Like, fucking hell, like, my joke would be, Nuke, it's actually normally British and French people, we have quite a difference culturally, where a British person will perceive a French person to be a little bit blunt, a bit rude, lacking manners in some ways. But obviously that's culturally because they have sort of a different vibe, right? The joke is Nuke actually very much within the English tradition of manners. He's like, after you. It's the playoffs up to... After you go first, and tell you what, it's wonderful. If you're playing him in a fucking key blow-off Blackett game, you'll be progressing onwards. Mate, there are some criminal throws in this series. Like the BDS one, they do the throws, but then the other thing is, it's not even like Fnatic caught them and looked awesome. Bro, like, they actually looked ass in all these games. They just looked bad. There's even that thing where, because of how long some of the games went, some of them got to do that bullshit thing where you get to look all right on the scoreboard at the end. So the guy who only goes on Gamepedia might even stupidly go, he carried this game. It's like, did he? Fuck. At the end, he just got kills. He had the damage champion, or he was the one on the outside of the team fight. Bear in mind, Fnatic, as we're speaking, they might end up being in the finals. Maybe they'll do the run. Who the fuck knows? But right now, bro, if they even do anything in these playoffs, they should turn around and just go like, fucking hell, like, thanks to the gods, we shouldn't even be in the playoffs anymore. Like, we should have been bounced after this BDS series. I think Fnatic looks terrible. Thoughts, guys?
Yep, that's it.
Oh, I mean, this is where I like to bring in my lens of analysis, right? Where I think in those games, I would say that this is the thing when you watch the LPL, it's kind of the reason why Knight and Peter likes to say describe him as this one lane style of player, where he brings in this what I call the spell economy style of gameplay into the picture. And why the spell economy style is good against the map control style is that the map control style ends up spending resources to get the map control in terms of their spells and cooldowns when they try to take the skirmishes to bully your of those areas of the map to get the sightings pushed in. And then the spell economy style says that okay, you spend these cooldowns now doing these things. I'm going to abuse the fact that you're skirmishing around these windows, to abuse the fact that your AD carry doesn't have flash. And that was kind of like the exact type of draft that would encapsulate how those two types of compositions will interact, where the map control team will take control of the entire game, and then the spell economy team will win one or two crucial fights and use that to just undo all of the leads that the map control team will kind of have. So as much as people would say that, oh, wow, this is BDS trolling and stuff like that, this is some of the things that I say is par for the course in terms of how these two types of team compositions interact. And it didn't help that BDS had a one carry composition and Fnatic had the perfect thing to say that every time your Jinx doesn't have flash, she is going to die because of Pantheon Leona,
Yeah,
right?
I'll
And
also say that Nuke's build shoehorned
It
them
was
into
wild,
one carry.
wasn't it? Yeah.
One like they could have had a two carry composition if he'd built correctly, for sure. No.
yes, right. That played into that as well. But it's generally the Jinx is the one central carry, and the
Of
moment
course.
the Jinx doesn't have flash, then it exaggerates that. So if Fnatic, we're very conscious of saying that we know that this is the matchup, this is the style that we're supposed to be playing. That is where I'll kind of like do the defense thing for them and say that this is where I felt that okay, it looked really ugly because there's all those style things where they shouldn't be doing. Humanoid had no business getting caught in those style positions. Some of the jungle potting I thought was very questionable as well. But here we have it. At the end of the day, this is how the two schools of thought interact, and Fnatic had the composition to do it.
The one thing that really scares me is we were glazing Fnatic a ton for their performance in Best of Ones, but the problem I have is I've now watched them play Heretics, G2, and BDS, and the thing that scares me is we've talked a lot about how amazing Razork and Mickey were as a duo early on the season and how they were able to get control and how Mickey was facilitating Razork and things like this. And what we've seen now in the G2 series and the BDS series is how bad do Fnatic look when Mickey and Razork don't play well together, right? And what happens if like one of them gets a cold or something this weekend? Like, are they just going to get stomped? Like they have shown in three best of three series, they have shown literally nothing when Razork isn't able to get in the game. And I mean, if I'm Koi with Illuria today, I'm going after Razork, and I'm seeing what Fnatic have after he's not in the game, because who else on this team is carrying when those two are out? Are we looking at upset? Okay, well then your game is going 45 minutes. Are we going on Humanoid and Oscar? Because frankly, yeah, like frankly, when Razork isn't in the game, it's impossible for Fnatic to win, or at least to be in control of their own destiny. They can wait for the enemy team to throw, but it looked really, really rough. And I mean, maybe it's a wake up call, but yeah, it's crazy that a team is able to drop this much level in less than 2 weeks on a relatively minor patch, right? Going from best of ones to best of threes, and that is concerning for me because literally. Thorin, 3 weeks ago, we were talking about how this team was going to look so good against international teams, and they're just, yeah. I don't even think they're the second favorite to go at this point.
I've got one last statement here, which is there's a concept I always bring up, which is, believe it or not, in the world of the occult, everything's about like symbols, signs, and words, right? And one of the core concepts is you have to be very careful what you name things because they have correspondences and sort of archetypal resonances. And so it's also why it's actually, you have to be careful, like if people know your name and understand what you represent, etc. So I've always said in League, people do not listen to this concept. Like one of the worst decisions ever by Nuke, great rename was to ever call your original name Nuclear Int. It's like being called irrelevant. If you ever then are shit in the meta, you have set yourself up for 1 million memes. Like the meme is right there that you're irrelevant, aren't you? Like if you are Nuclear Int. The problem is that Nuclear Int literally defines his fucking playing career. Because the worst thing is, it's not that he ints all the time. Absolutely not. In fact, he's above average player. He's generally actually a fairly safe player. But when he does an int, it's a fucking Nuclear Int. It's such a perfectly crafted name. Because he does that thing in League, which tortures all the players who are the carry players, which is you can in League make 7 correct decisions and then do 1/8 decision that's shit, that ruins the whole thing. That's all everyone remembers and you're an idiot. So I'll give you this quick analogy. Nuke, in this scenario, he was set up for success, right? He booked the restaurant. He knew exactly where he was going to take her. They arrived there, violins playing. No, 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 no. I actually did book that. Like, take to your seat if you come here. Roses. Oh, fresh red roses. Wonderful, yeah. Starter. I've already asked the chef to prepare a little dish I think you might like. It's got a little rustic flavour I enjoy. Oh, cultured. Interesting. Then all of a sudden, along comes the wine. I'll take the Chateau Blanc 1910, whatever. You go, oh, wow, cool. He knows about wine as well. He holds a hand during the conversation, you know, drawing her in. He leans in for a kiss, and then he shits his pants. And the problem with that scenario is, the date's over, mate. There you go. That's the end of the show.